Hello and welcome to today's Hanapin marketing webinar. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to talk about more customers, lower CPL, staying competitive with AI and Google Ads. Today's presenters are myself, Michael. I'm a senior account manager here at Hanapin Marketing. And we also have Blair from DialogTech. He's actually one of our, as we were joking before the webinar, regulars, as he's been on 5 or 6 of our Hanapin sponsored webinars. So thanks, Blair, for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
So a little bit about Hanapin, if you're not familiar with us, we're an industry-leading digital marketing agency. We focus on complex businesses, meaning we manage multi-brands, regions, and service lines, and we work to increase their market share by finding the best opportunities that are going to work for their business. Our solutions include paid search, paid social, shopping, and programmatic. And we're here to talk about a little bit about that today. If you want to learn more about our services or us as a business, just go to hanapinmarketing.com/complexbusinesses. And in addition to our services, we also run the PPC Hero blog and our conference series, HeroConf. And a few of our clients include Weather Channel, Iceland Air, Highlights, and American Eagle, along with many others that have complex multi-brand affiliations. And we also just recently, this past March, commissioned a new Forrester study to find out our total economic impact of Hanapin marketing, meaning did our clients make more money than what they paid for us, and if so, how much was that? And then we were just really interested in understanding and interested to hear the Forrester team research with our clients and how that would improve or dispel what we believe to be our differentiators as an agency. And it turns out that proved there's a lot of value in what we bring to our clients. We can see that we can help our clients grow by over 300% more than what they actually paid for our services. And as you know, profit is everything. If you're interested in finding out a little bit more about the Forrester report and what they found, you can actually go to hanapinmarketing.com/Forrester, or you can click the link in the chat box now that's in the webinar control panel. And I'm actually going to hand it over to Blair to talk a little bit about DialogTech.
Well, thanks, Michael. Just real quick, if you're not familiar with DialogTech, we provide businesses and agencies with AI-driven marketing analytics for their inbound calls and those voice conversations. So this is obviously a topic that's near and dear to our hearts. Many of the world's leading brands and agencies use us to attribute calls, analyze conversations for insights to optimize marketing, personalize experiences, and drive revenue. So, again, looking forward to explaining a little bit more about this in a bit.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Blair. Also, if you want to join the conversation today, you can use the hashtag ThinkPPC in your Twitter tweets. That's always a fun one to say. Or use the webinar question box to send us your questions as we move along through the webinar. The first thing we want to do, though, is get a live poll here of everyone that's on the webinar. How long have you been in PPC? Let us know here, if 0 to 1 years all the way up to 5+ years. This helps us understand who our audience is, how we talk about the content today, and also how we prep for other webinars in the future. Awesome. Well, we got quite the spread today, but we actually have more that are experienced users with listeners with us today, from 25% 1 to 3, all the way up to 37% of our users have 5+ years. So welcome to the webinar today. Hopefully you find this information helpful as you expand your knowledge in AI. And as we all know, that is definitely the next phase of our journey as digital marketers. The first thing that what we want to kind of talk through is the competitive nature of Google. And we all know that Google has been the leading ad platform, over the last decade. And there are new players in the space, but Google Ads continues to grow its market share, how much we use it on a daily basis, how many more competitors are coming into that space. And we can tell that even just by the numbers. Google U.S. digital revenues will reach almost $40 billion with a B in 2018, and that's another 14.5% increase over last year. So it's becoming, as we know, more and more competitive and harder to stand out against everyone else that's trying to take up our impression share, and are also, in the same auctions that we're in and going after the same user or similar users that we're targeting. With that, Google controls over 40%, 40.7, almost 41% of the digital ad market. When you think about it, it's not quite 50%, but that's a lot when you think about how many other ad platforms there are in the space. From Facebook to Twitter to LinkedIn, Snapchat, Quora. I mean, there's a huge list outside of just Google. Bing Ads obviously is our other main search platform. So when you think about 41% of the ad share being on Google, that's a pretty significant number, and definitely outranks anybody else's share of the ad market. So it just takes us that much more insight, strategy to make up, to make a solid strategy, and also just to stay competitive. With that 49 billion, 28.5 of that is on search, 5.2 and 2.9 on the peripheral network display and YouTube. The crazy thing is that that YouTube is just continuing to grow, so is display, but that there's that much emphasis on search. I mean, there's so much happening there, and that's where everyone goes to first to make their biggest impact before they go to the other networks. So it's becoming harder and harder to stand out. So we're going to talk about a little bit today on what is AI, how do we currently use it, what are some ways that Google has already implemented AI and machine learning, just to get our foundations. As the poll indicated, there's a lot of us have been in the space a long time, but I think having just kind of a full understanding, or at least a partnered understanding in what that is and how we're going to look at this today, will help us in our discussion and throughout the webinar. We're going to look at where we can leverage machine learning, how we can try to better our CPLs and KPIs using smart bidding, and then we'll talk about how how we can use AI to analyze the call conversions for actual marketing insights as we talk with Blair through the DialogTech platform. So first, what is AI? AI is a computer system that can perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision making, and language translation. And then machine learning that output and based on those results without being explicitly programmed by humans to make those changes. So a little example of that is writing a computer program to actually learn from examples, which starts to get into that whole definitely Skynet, I'll use that analogy, term of the future, but it means that the software can learn over time to produce better outcomes. So there's a lot of things we can do and that we're already doing in daily life. So why not trust it in our ads platform? So the first thing is virtual assistants are using AI and machine learning, traffic predictions, online fraud detection, delivery services are using it, and there's unique recommendations that we get from Google Now, from our accounts that give us recommendations, the best route for our traffic. There's a lot of different ways that AI is working, and so why don't we use this as advertisers to maximize the results in our campaign? There's a lot of different automation options and techniques that are already built into the Google Ads platform. Budgeting and bidding, ensuring that each auction has a goal when we're determining the budget. We can utilize and tell Google what we're going after, and it will help us do that through budget and bid. Now more and more creative, automated ad creation strategies find the best message for the right audience. There's obviously the automated reporting. This one is the one that's really been around longest. I think the one we think about least that's actually using AI or learning to give us insights into predictions of what can happen. And then campaign creation. More and more campaigns are becoming automated, like smart display shopping. We give it some information and it outputs trial and error and creates easier ways for us as marketers to implement those campaigns. So a few products and campaigns that are using the AI machine learning now, similar audiences is looking at obviously those that are like-minded to the people that we've identified as a user, and then goes out and finds people that are similar to that based on their behavior, which is using that AI, that machine learning to understand the likeness between our users and others that could be out there. Universal app campaigns is another one that's using all sorts of signals to get a full app install. Smart bidding, obviously looking at conversion data, click data, user behavior to really focus in on what's going to maximize the marketing objective that we've called out. Data-driven attribution, which is the newest attribution model by Google. Dynamic search ads and ad extensions. As we know, there's obviously the automated ad extensions. There's also even when we're looking at location ad extensions where Google is pairing our location with a user in a certain location, of taking that computer power and that AI machine to know when and how to share the extensions with people who are likely to. So the thing I want to talk about that I think is super actionable today that helps us really dial in our campaigns and create results is smart bidding. I know it's a hot topic. It's something that we're talking about a lot in the industry. Google is talking about a lot. And there's a lot of reasons when you really start to break it down into what things were like 3-5 years ago and what things are like now in terms of search signals. And I think this best illustrates that kind of dynamic shift in why manual bidding is becoming harder and harder for us to actually keep up with on a day-to-day basis, and why we need to start adopting some level of automation and machine learning to help us do that. 3 to 5 years ago, we just looked at keyword bids, and that was it. And we used time of day and stuff to identify areas that we could, look at when enhance campaigns and make some bid adjustments based on some of those signals. But now there's tons of different signals that are out there that are impacting our performance, the user behavior, and we really need something else to come in and help us identify those signals, when to raise bids, when not. And since auctions have always been in real time, we can't be making those bid adjustments in real time. So we need something else to help us in the millisecond auctions understand a user's behavior and help us maximize our result. We also want to, with that, work smarter with how we're looking at strategy versus day-to-day tasks. So there's a lot of things that go into bidding that we have to think about, and we could kind of take out of our equation to make the front-end aspects easier to get to the conversion. There's testing new ad formats, clutter. There's a lot of things that go into this, but the whole goal is to work smarter. And both myself and Blair will be talking about this from the call side and how we can use AI to maximize those signals and conversions to complete that full funnel process. But from the front end, there's a lot of ways like bidding, the new enhanced ad formats that can help us work smarter and think more in the strategic light. So a few optimization tactics that we can look at and use. It's really, I think the biggest strategy and the biggest thing that we have to look at as marketers with using machine learning is tying whatever we're going to use with our marketing objective. It's really easy just to take the recommendation from Google, from another marketer saying this strategy or this tactic, this bid strategy tactic works really well when I implement it. but then take that and understand how that correlates with your business strategy. Are you looking for visibility? Are you looking for website traffic? Are you looking for your conversions and your sales or leads? Or are you looking to actually increase revenue? Because when we can better align our marketing objective with the AI objective, our results will ultimately have greater chance for success, and we'll have a better understanding of our testing strategies and how we can optimize that to hit our goal, as we're looking at our actual signals and objectives versus just looking at what we only want to do, target CPA because that's what Google is telling us. We can look at some different options to better align our goals with what's actually possible. There's a few things though with that we want to do to measure success. Really, we want to look at running an experiment over 4 weeks. When we run it too short, we don't give the algorithms time, and I think this is where, and it's been my pitfall in introducing AI and machine learning into my accounts, is giving it enough time to not only learn, but then show success. So it really can take 1 to 2 weeks for the learning process to even happen. And over that, we do see that fluctuation in trial and error of results maybe fluctuating. Maybe we see things decline for a week as it's relearning and understanding our marketing objective with the audience. Whereas then the second couple of weeks is really that ramp up period. Did the AI and machine learning take the initial data and then now turn that into results over a 2-week period? So I challenge you in this whole conversation to really create a longer testing cycle for machine learning strategies and tests, because I think you'll find, or at least have better understanding and analysis of what's happening and why, and instead of turning it on for a week or 2 weeks, making drastic changes, changing budgets regularly, and then not understanding why something's not working. Another tidbit that's been really interesting is the more we learn about this is when we make a lot of manual changes, that system has to relearn. So when we can set up our clients or our business with the understanding and strategy around, we have to let the machine do its work first before we make drastic, large changes to what's going on in that campaign. Let's see what it can tell us, and then we can make changes based off of that. Also, use the bid strategy reports to understand what was happening before the strategy was implemented and then after. And then with that report and with looking at the analysis aspect, make sure that you're only really focusing on that strategy's KPIs. It's really easy to look across the board and say, well, this did really poorly, like click-through rate, but I was trying to get conversions. Let's work on okay, so if we're trying to go for conversions, let's look at conversions and conversion rate in our CPL. Let's look at those numbers and see how that's changing in contrast. Staying focused on the marketing objective KPI in this state in the game will help maximize those results. I have a couple of case studies here. One's from Google. It's an online marketplace where they implemented target CPA, and they saw an 89% conversion increase and a 32% decrease in CPA, and which is a great result. And we all know that Google's going to have awesome case studies. But I wanted to show you one that's actually from one of my own clients where I implemented this as we were struggling to see lead gain for education client. And in one segment of their business, we were having some trouble with some new SERP changes, with changes in search results. There's a lot of different dynamics that have been happening. And we exhausted a lot of our strategic plans trying to increase our leads, really decrease the cost for those leads. And so we did a new updated test that combined max conversions and target CPA to let Google help us understand what's really out there. Because we know that if we've exhausted all of our manual process and all of our manual strategies that we know and have worked, what happens if Google's machine does the same thing? If we test that out and the results are the same, then we know this is no longer just a bidding problem or a specific machine learning problem. This is a deeper issue that we can then dive in and figure out how to diagnose that. But what we found is over a 2-month period, we actually saw Google make some fluctuations in our results, but then since then, our results have actually been improving drastically with that machine learning, with implementing that AI. We've seen CPCs drop 43% as Google is being smart about how it's bidding in real time for the right person, the right audience for the lead. Increase click-through rate because we're actually going after the right audience with the right message. Our leads have increased 17%, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're dealing in hundreds, that's a 65 lead increase over that period, which is actually pretty significant. And then that actually led to a 27% decrease in our cost per lead, which again, that tells a lot in how this bidding is working. And there's obviously always room for improvement now that we see these numbers and how we can optimize certain areas of our campaign and strategies to improve that. But we know now that with machine learning, we can make even more drastic improvements quicker using that insight and that real-time data versus our manual approach and human insight. So a few other optimization tips when targeting in the customer journey. I think one thing that's really important is to segment your audience and use attribution. This helps both the machine and us understand how those optimizations and strategies are actually working, because each audience and each segment of your audience is going to respond and be different. So lumping those all together is only going to muddy that data. It's going to make it harder for the machine to learn. It's going to be harder for us to strategize and build out successful campaigns. Another one is responsive search ads, as we're all now aware, where we can utilize all of our different messaging types, and instead of continually updating and A/B testing, allow Google to help us understand what messages work for the right user while still being in line with our branding, with our messaging, but just putting it all in the right order that's going to resonate best. Smart shopping and display, let Google optimize for you. This is, I know, a scary one, and probably a lot of going, nope, not going to do that. But I challenge you to at least find the right campaign or right product, right service to test this on, and test it out. Because over the last year, when you look at the timelines of what Google has implemented or not and have changed in all of their AI machine learning strategies, implementation processes, how it learns, it's changed quite a bit, and it's becoming more and more efficient. So, and one way that I think becomes even less of a hurdle is optimizing towards pay for conversions instead of clicks, using a target CPA. So there's some hesitancy. Instead of paying for every single click that comes, try it out by pay for conversion if you have a decent target CPA value, and use that as kind of your guide, and also incentivize Google to find those conversions for you. Lastly, as I kind of mentioned and alluded to earlier, testing the bid strategies. If you're tracking for conversion, use either target CPA or max conversion, which obviously is a pretty standard or easy thing to follow. But letting it run for 30 days or more before making major changes or judgment calls is crucial, or at least a key part of this. So if that means testing it on a campaign where you got nothing to lose, that's great. Try it there, but definitely make that part of your parameter to allow the machine to help you over an extended period of time without making quick judgments. Looking at and then look at all the other factors first: search terms, landing pages, etc. As you're doing that, see if there's anything outlying that might be hindering or influencing that machine learning. And then testing responsive ads, I think, is the next thing that's a pretty easy machine learning tactic that can be implemented simply and effectively without a lot of guidance or peripheral knowledge or need, and can be implemented right into your current search campaigns and test that out against your current ETAs. And I want to hand it over to Blair to talk through how AI for call conversions and how this all kind of comes together.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. That was a ton of great information, and I'm going to ask you to stick with me and be my co-pilot to advance the slides for me. But thanks, everybody. Michael,
Yes,
at the beginning of his presentation, touched on some of the ad spend that's happening, why Google Ads is becoming so competitive, how much money the U.S. advertisers are pouring in to Google Ads. So, of course, with increased spend comes not only increased competition, but increased pressure on all of us to prove our ROI and optimize our ROI across Google Ads. So I'm going to be touching on a deep dive into how you can use AI to uncover marketing insights from the calls you're generating into your business, whether it's a call center or a brick and mortar location, and really show you some really interesting insights that you can use to take back and optimize your Google Ads ROI. So next slide, please, Michael. So to start off, let's look at what a data-driven approach to Google Ads ROI can look like. And this is obviously a summary, it's a high-level view, but for most of us, you can sort of break it down into 5 steps. The first step is, you're investing, you set up your Google Ads campaigns and you start them running. They generate conversions, whether it's an online conversion on your website or someone calls you or they visit your store or dealership or brick and mortar location in person if that's an option. You then, as a marketer, need to measure the value of what kind of conversion it was. Was it a sales lead or not? Did it convert to a sales opportunity or an appointment? Was it a call from a potential new customer or a repeat customer? All of this data has value to you when you look to optimize. You can then decide for that particular conversion, what should I do next? Should I retarget them or put them into a lookalike campaign or exclude them altogether from seeing my ads? And as you keep generating conversions and measuring results, you can then determine how best to optimize your spend and optimize your strategies for the channels, ads, keywords, web page variations, targeting strategies, etc., that are driving the biggest bang for your buck. So next slide. For most of us, this works well when everything happens online. So your ads are online, people convert on your website. As marketers, we can then get insight into the type of lead it is and what kind of conversion it was, and then make determinations how best. But if you go to the next slide, sometimes this can break down for us when somebody actually engages with one of our Google ads, either search display, YouTube, visits our site, calls from a call extension, and triggers a call. We then aren't able to see what type of lead it was, and then make these determinations with steps 4 and 5 in order to really optimize our ROI. So that's really what I'm going to be going into today, is the role that AI can play to help you see number 3. So if you go to the next slide, why are calls so important? Well, as we spend more and more on mobile advertising, and with Google Ads, almost all of the growth we're seeing in spend is really targeted towards smartphones and mobile devices. The desktop spend is relatively flat. As we increase and put more and more of our budget towards targeting people on their smartphones with our Google ad campaigns, a natural result is an increase in call conversions. You can see from the data on the left, over the past 5 years, from 2015 up into what will be 2020, we're seeing expected a huge growth in phone call conversions, specifically from mobile ad campaigns, billions and billions. And you can see on the right, last year in the U.S. alone, we're talking about over 48 billion calls from mobile search ads alone, 29 billion from display ads, 19 billion from mobile social ads. The point is, when people engage with or search for businesses on their smartphones, they often engage with those companies by calling. The call conversion is the natural result of engaging on your smartphone. Next slide. It's also true specifically for local mobile searches. So, if you're targeting Google ads, you've got local ads that are, target people on their smartphones. People do often call when searching for businesses on mobile and smartphones. You can see on the right, Google stats show that when someone runs a mobile search, they're 40% more likely to call a business, and those audiences usually have high purchasing intent. They're 51% more likely to make a purchase. And you can see the stats on the bottom with the increase of people running local searches on a smartphone versus non-local searches. Again, a really high intent audience, an audience that wants to call you. So when you're running these localized Google ad campaigns, calls should be something that you're not ignoring. Next. And this previous slide, I think we skipped 2 ones there. So as you can see, when someone calls you, they are more likely to convert. There's a Forrester study that shows that people who call businesses spend more, convert faster, and churn less. They have higher retention rates. And we've seen that, calls to businesses convert to revenue to customers 10 to 15 times more than web leads. So the whole point of this is that these are a great audience. We're talking about trying to optimize your Google Ads ROI. Phone calls can play a big role in that. Next slide. And it's not just for people who engage with you on their smartphones. If you find yourself in one of these industries or an industry where you're selling something, a product or service that's complex or expensive, infrequent, or urgent, chances are you're seeing a heavy percentage of your conversions coming in over the phone, whether it's calling an automotive dealership to schedule a test drive, or calling an insurance provider, or scheduling an appointment at a doctor's office, or looking to book an appointment, a vacation at a resort or a cruise. All of these fall into the category of complex, urgent, infrequent purchases. Someone who's looking for home services. If you've got termites in your house or a leaky roof, a phone call is usually the most popular conversion, and Google Ads are generating a ton of these. So next slide. So if you're familiar with call tracking, yes, and maybe many of you are using it to tie the calls you're generating back to your Google Ads campaigns and other marketing campaigns, that's great. You can see some of the attribution data that call tracking provides, which is a great first step. But what it doesn't tell you, just if all you're doing is looking at the conversion, what's generating a conversion, is what happens on that call. So what happens on a phone call that you're generating from your Google Ads is extremely valuable insight for marketers. And that is really where AI can help you. And that's really where I'm going to spend the rest of my presentation time, is to really show you what you can learn and how that can benefit your Google Ads campaign. Next slide. So what AI can tell you is AI can analyze the call recordings and transcriptions. It can look and see that to then determine a bunch of really interesting insights, which it can either give to you in the form of reports that you can look at, or you can actually pass those insights directly into the other either Google Ads or the other platforms that you use to do your digital advertising, whether it's Google Analytics or Google Marketing Platform, if you're an Adobe customer, or a bid management tool, or you use Optimizely for an A/B testing tool. Whatever tools you're using to measure and optimize your digital advertising today, you can pass the call data filtered through AI into there for some really impactful optimizations. Next slide. So that's what I'm going to dive into. There are, sorry, you've skipped, there you go. There are actually, some really important questions that AI can analyze the calls you're generating to tell you, and you can use that to make some really important optimizations. So there are really 6 questions. There are more than that, but I'm going to, I don't want to overwhelm you, so I'm going to go into 6 key questions that AI can answer to help you improve your Google Ads ROI. So next slide. The first question, and really the most basic question, is when you're generating a call, when you're spending money on Google Ads and someone's either calling one of your business locations, or if you've got a call center or an office where you're sending calls to agents to, as marketers, you need to know not just that you generated the call, but what was the quality? Was it an actual good sales lead that you generated, or did you spend your money to generate a call that's not something that you want to allocate budget to generate? So you spend, Google Ads generates a call, the conversation happens, AI will then, can then analyze those conversations for evidence that what happened on that call indicates it was a good lead. So these are just some possible examples, and it could be specific to your business, but if the caller asked about an appointment or about pricing information, or they placed an order, obviously that's indicative of a good sales lead. Or if the agent, provided pricing options, or they provided a quote, think about what signals on a call for your particular business can indicate whether or not that's a good sales lead. And AI can find those calls and tell you and grade the calls, measure and score the calls to make sure that those calls are good leads. Then you can then pass that data back into Google Ads and start optimizing not just for what's generating a call, but for what's generating a good call to your business. Next slide. An example here of a customer that's doing this with us, Comfort Keepers. They're a leading senior care provider. They provide in-home care for seniors. They've got around 450 locations across the U.S. They generate several thousand calls from their national marketing to these locations, and they're using AI to analyze each call to say, hey, was it a call from a potential new customer, or was it a call from a current customer? Or was it some other type of call that's not, like, was it a spam call or a solicitation or some other type of non-customer call? And if it was from a potential new customer, does the conversation indicate that this is a good lead or a bad lead? And that can help them then prove their ROI much better to those particular locations where they're sending calls, as well as make better optimizations to generate more good calls to their location. Next slide. One tip I would say is that you should compare calls from call extensions versus your website for Google Ads. So if many of us have call extensions in our paid search ads, if you're generating a call from that call extension versus your landing page, I would look in to see which ones are generating better calls for you. So one customer of ours, logistics company, found that when they looked into calls from call extensions from branded keywords, 90% of those calls that they were spending money to generate were actually for job seekers, not an audience that they wanted to generate. So they actually pulled their call extensions from their ads. Conversely, a pest control customer of ours, when analyzing the calls, found that 2 times more people who called from call extensions converted to customers than landing pages. People, it's a pest control, it's an emergency scenario. People really want to call. They don't care about clicking through to a website. They're ready to engage. Again, it depends on your business. It could be different for you, but you should look and compare the calls from call extensions versus your website, and AI can help you analyze those conversations for that quality insight. Next slide. So, question number 2, what products or services are they calling about? So, think about if you're selling multiple products or services, you're running ads. As marketers, it can be great insight to know, okay, this ad, this experience generated a call for this particular product versus this particular service. A customer of ours here that's doing this is a large automaker. They've got around 400 U.S. dealerships. When somebody calls from their Google Ads, they analyze the call to determine if it was a sales call, someone calling about a vehicle, or someone calling about maintenance or parts or some other type. And then they're able to then take that insight and go back and say, okay, let's optimize for what's generating the most sales calls or service calls. And they actually know what their ads are driving, and they can make smarter optimizations. Next slide. Question number 3, is the call coming in from a new lead, or is it coming from a current customer? Now think about your business and the campaigns you're running. Maybe you're great with anyone calling you. You love repeat customers, but some businesses don't. They only want to spend money to generate calls from new leads versus current customers. Current customers might be calling about a support issue. Marketers don't want to spend necessarily budget to generate that call. And a customer of ours, Sylvan, they're a child tutoring provider. They got about 800 locations. They actually analyze the calls to determine if the call from their Google Ads was from a new caller, a new potential customer versus a current customer. And then they only pass the data for first-time callers into their Google marketing platform, what we know as DoubleClick prior. And then they can optimize the bid management for the keywords driving the most first-time callers, the audience they care about. Next slide. Did the call result in a conversion? Obviously, this is probably the biggest question for all of us. We want to spend money not just to generate clicks and calls, but actual conversions and customers. So you can have AI analyze the conversations to any of your locations or your call center or your offices to determine if the call from that particular keyword ad, particular banner ad, YouTube ad, whatever it is, resulted in actual conversion, whether that's an appointment or a booking or sales opportunity, whatever your business considers a conversion. And then you can actually improve your ROI and make really better optimizations to drive revenue. Next slide. So you've got all this information. You know what types of callers each caller is. you know, you're able to then actually do some really great retargeting and lookalike campaigns. So, for example, someone calls your business, they call one of your locations. It's a good conversation, but they didn't convert. They're still researching a purchase. As marketers, you could then put your AI tells you that information. So you could then put that caller into a retargeting campaign, either paid search or just a YouTube campaign, or retarget them with banner ads across the Google network, for example, with specific ads meant to try to get somebody to become a customer. Maybe you have specific offers. You want to have somebody who called you and is a good lead but didn't convert. So a special offer, for example. Or perhaps you want to spend more when they run a keyword search to make sure your ads show up for this person, because you know that they are a quality lead that you want your ads to show up front and center for. So you want to bid more. Or maybe you want to bid different keywords based on the fact that you know they're a good lead but they haven't converted yet. Or if the caller did convert and AI says yes, they converted to a customer, you can then put them perhaps into an upsell or cross-sell campaign. So for example, if you're a resort, someone books a cruise, they book a vacation, you can then maybe show them ads to upsell spa services, for example. Or if somebody books auto insurance, maybe you want to show them ads to bundle that with home insurance. Think about your business and what you sell. If it makes sense to target a customer who converted over the phone with another specific offer. And if they are a good lead, of course, or someone who called and converted, or they're a great type of lead, someone you want to find more of, you can put them into your lookalike audiences, so that when a similar audience who match those characteristics runs a search on Google, or they're on YouTube, or they're browsing the internet, you can have your paid search ads, your display ads, your YouTube ads target these new people because they match characteristics of good callers. Or lastly, you can suppress the caller. So if the caller already became a customer and you have nothing more to sell, don't spend money retargeting them. Don't waste budget retargeting somebody who already was a customer. Conversely, don't waste money retargeting somebody who is a bad lead or is calling about a career or some other kind of thing that you don't want to spend your marketing budget on. So again, all this information is possible by getting analytics on what happened on the call. Next slide. I would consider actually even splitting out these campaigns and having special campaigns specifically for someone who called, because someone who called is a good lead, but it also shows you that they prefer to call. Their preference is to engage with your business by calling. If you're going to retarget them, why not have an ad that speaks to that? Like here, Sears says, call today for your free home estimate. They have a call extension in their search ad. If you click on the ad, you go to a landing page with a prominent phone number as a call to action. If you know somebody wants to call you, has a history of calling, it's an easier way to increase conversion rates by targeting them with specific calls to actions that speak to the way they want to convert, which could be a phone call. Next slide. Here's an example of Comfort Keepers. Our customer is doing this really well. They know what happens on their calls, so they can put good callers into lookalike campaigns and then target new audiences that resemble those people with an ad that speaks to how they want to convert. You can see the display ad here. It says, talk to a Comfort Keeper today. It's a call to action that talks to the ability of having a conversation over the phone when somebody, and then that's a great way to get somebody to engage with you and call. These lookalike audiences based on good callers have resulted in 4 times the calls to Comfort Keepers as the next best targeting strategy. Next slide. Question number 5 is actually, what types of questions do potential callers ask? So as marketers, if we're able to get insight into the questions that somebody asks before they make a purchase, what things do they need to know, we could actually then create great campaigns, great web content that actually answers these questions and really gets people to convert. Now, if you go to the next slide, obviously a great source of this information, you might be thinking, how can I possibly know what questions as a marketer people are asking? If you analyze your phone calls, people who are calling your business, you can determine that. So here's one example of a customer of ours, Central Restaurants. They sell restaurant equipment to restaurants and hotels. If somebody calls from a particular product page, Central can then analyze that conversation to see what questions they ask. And then they can then go back to that particular product page that generated the call, and they can answer those questions on the page. So it's a great way to increase SEO. It's a great way to increase conversion rates by answering questions people care about for each of your products on the pages of your website. And we've seen that by doing this, and they've helped to increase new customers by 13%. Next slide. Analyzing what happens on the calls is important because what happens on the calls to businesses ultimately impacts your Google Ads ROI. So, we all want to generate clicks and calls, but ultimately it's the call experience that your business provides these callers will help determine if they convert to an appointment or a customer. So we found, a study of ours found that 1 in 5 paid search calls goes to voicemail. So are your calls even being answered by the businesses you're sending your calls to? And others in the studies like this auto industry found that, people at dealerships don't ask callers for an appointment, or they don't suggest alternatives for vehicles. Think about where you're sending calls, who's answering those calls, and what you would want them to actually say in order to help convert the leads you're spending money to generate into customers. Next slide. So question number 6 is, how are your locations handling the calls you're sending them? You can use AI to analyze calls you send to your locations or call center, and then as marketers look at reports to say, hey, for this location, what percentage of my calls from Google Ads are going to voicemail, for example? And then, what's the lead score for the calls I'm sending? And when I send a good lead to a location, how effective is that location at converting them to a customer? For many of our businesses, the people who are answering the calls that we're spending money to generate, might be mechanics, for example, if you're an auto repair place, or they might not be trained to answer calls. It's not their core business, their core function for being at your company. As marketers, you really need to know what's happening on those calls to those locations. And then if you find out that there are issues, work with them to correct it. Next slide. An example here, a customer of ours, Sylvan Learning, who I talked about before, if they see that a particular location is underperforming, the marketing team can pull up all the calls they've sent, pull up those conversations, and then determine, A, are more calls than normal going to voicemail? Are people answering the calls? Is this location saying the right things on the calls? For example, are they mentioning the right national offers? Are they using the right scripts to convert a caller to a customer? And what kind of leads am I sending? Is it a quality lead or a bad lead? Do I need to do something with my marketing to improve the quality of the leads I'm sending? And by getting these types of answers, Sylvan marketing team can then talk to that location and help improve their over-the-phone conversion rates by making answering a call a priority, by making you saying the right things on the phone a priority. They can help these locations increase conversions and convert more callers to customers. Next slide. So I hope you found that interesting. I know I went through a lot of information very quickly, but if you want to go to the DialogTech website, we've got a bunch of ebooks there that you can download that drill into more information for each of these topics. Next slide. And of course, if you want to get a demo, a personal walkthrough of our platform, we'd be happy to do that for you and show you some of the reports and analytics and answer questions on how getting AI-driven analytics on calls can help your Google Ads ROI. So Michael, let me bring you back and we can do a little Q&A and finish up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Blair. That was awesome information, super in-depth. And as Blair mentioned, if you would like the DialogTech to give you that personal walkthrough, you can do so. I think there's there's a quick poll there now that you can actually submit to get that. Also, if you're juggling multi-brands, we know that it's tricky, and there's a lot of unique problems, including cannibalization of your ads, and you're trying to gain market share and allocating budgets across those different segments. We have a new playbook that will talk through some of those major pain points that a lot of companies with multi-brands and multi-segments face and how to work through them. So if you like a free download, you can also click that box as well. And if you opt into that, we'll send it straight to your inbox. So with that, as you're filling that out, we will start taking some questions. And actually, Blair, we have quite a few. We have a lot of great ones here. And so I'm going to start with one for you, just since we were on that topic and it's all top of mind. Does the AI system listen to the call to detect those keywords that are spoken?
Yeah, so the way the system works is the call takes place, it records and transcribes the call, and the AI then analyzes those recordings and transcriptions for any keywords you wish. There are a lot of things, from the sentiment of the caller into what actually is said by whom, and in what context, and then it can learn and analyze that in order to determine the answers that you want. So it can be specific to your business. So if you're a dealership and you have specific asks like test drive, for example, things like that, it can find those answers for you. Or if you're an insurance company and it's request a quote or how much does it cost, questions like that, it can be tuned to your specific business to find those insights.
Awesome. And I think along with that, kind of a follow-up question that came in after that as well that I think maybe you can speak to a little bit is, the machine is learning, it's understanding those keywords. And you spoke to this a little bit, and this is probably a larger question where I would probably encourage someone to do the walkthrough. But how do you then put those people into the right audience? And maybe I'm going to tag on to this a little bit. How are you using the AI to help segment and put those people into the right audience based on what the machine learned, what the AI is actually capturing from those keywords?
Yeah, I mean, you can connect that AI. You can connect the information, whether it was a good lead or it was a call from a new customer or a current customer, and all of those insights, whatever you want to learn, you connect that basically to the person's phone number, and then you can use that to automatically target them. Google lets you upload phone numbers, email addresses, etc. So does Facebook. So do other targeting platforms. So that's one way to do it, is just to connect them to the phone number which you're capturing at the time of the call.
Awesome. And I also just quickly want to thank you for that answer. Remind people that you can ask your questions in the chat box if you do have them. We'll answer a few more here before we wrap up since we did get a late start. One question that I know I've been asking that was asked in the chat was regarding the RSAs. Is there any update on when message-specific reporting will be available? And the short answer is no. I know that our team's trying to figure out how you maybe build around it, create separate or more manual reports through downloads. But I have not heard anything yet on any specific messaging reporting and what availability is that. So I think for the interim, it's learning how to use Excel or Google Docs to kind of help do that for you. Another question, if I set up a campaign with smart bidding, it takes days to get enough data to perform. Is it possible to get a campaign to perform immediately or in less than 5 to 14 days? That's a really great question. Yes and no. I think again it varies, and I feel like these days I'm using more and more the answer of it depends. But I think there are ways if you set it up correctly, you have the data. But I think the main thing with it is making sure that you have data before you start smart bidding. So if you're talking about setting up a campaign that's brand new, it's not going to perform in less than 14 days because there's no historical data for that machine to learn from. We need historical data to understand at least the initial trial for it to ramp up. So if it has initial data and it's been running for say 30 days, maybe try a different strategy. Maybe try a different smart bidding strategy that's more in line with your marketing objective, or if you feel like it's 100% aligned. One thing that I test is one that's maybe outside my initial alignment. So as an example, if I'm using max conversions or target CPA for conversions, I don't feel like that's working and it's not picking up like it should, or I feel like it should in the first 2 weeks, though as I mentioned is the kind of learning period, then I would maybe test out something like max clicks or something that is more a visibility factor and just try and gain more data for your budget and then maximize that and then switch back over to a more specific conversion or marketing objective bidding strategy. So hopefully that helps answer your question. Great. I think that's about the time that we have for today. We really thank you for attending the webinar and using the hashtag ThinkPPC. You can contact Hanapin directly through marketing@hanapinmarketing.com, or you can also contact DialogTech directly at contact@dialogtech.com. if you have any other questions, definitely reach out to us, but we really appreciate you joining us today, and we hope you have a good rest of your Thursday.